Hi, I'm Philth. We're sat in my studio on the edge of North London and I've got Computer Music here today. I'm going to talk to them about a track from my album, and the tune I chose to talk about is one of the most popular in my DJ sets. It's getting a lot of a great response from people. It's called The Teacher, and I picked this track because, well, for many reasons. One, yeah, a lot of people are asking about it and they like it, but also it has a lot of strong personal meaning and message to me from the time when I made it. And also it's a good way for me to show you some of the techniques I do to get in particular my bass sound, because this one is a lot of layering going on and it really demonstrates how I do what I do. So to tell you a bit more about the tune, yeah, it's on my album. It was released start of February this year on part 2 of my album, Moments in Time, Dispatch Recordings. Big shout out to the boss, TC1. So the track itself was written probably about 2 years ago, to be honest. And it was one of the later ones I did when writing my album. And without going too deep into it, during the process of writing my album, I was off work due to stress. I was not doing very well mentally, and I was really like battling in the studio, trying to force it every day, and it wasn't doing me any good. I was really struck for inspiration. So I had to go all the way back to the source of what inspired me in the first place. And there's a mix CD that I've always loved, right? My favourite mix CD ever, from 1997, Dreamscape, DJ Randall and MC Fats, two legends in the game and two really nice guys as well when you get to know them. And this CD was 1997, and it was when drum and bass was really morphing from jungle into the tech step sound. And I'd never heard anything like it. I was growing up on the edge of London. I was listening to pirate radio, Cool FM, Eruption FM, Pulse FM, recording tapes all the time. I was listening to jungle compilation CDs, you know, Jungle Mania, Jungle Hits, Volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was buying tape packs as well. But the music that I heard on this mix was like nothing that I'd heard in these tapes. It was futuristic, sci-fi, dark, unsettling, and it really inspired me so much in what I love as a DJ and a producer. So going back to the tune itself, I got that CD, or I found it on YouTube. The CD is somewhere, it's in a box somewhere. I found the mix on YouTube, Randall Fats Dreamscape 1997. I put the mix on, I turned it up very loud, I cooked myself lunch, I listened to it all the way from start to finish. By the time it was done, I knew what to do. I wanted to go back to these dark tech step inspired vibes. So the tune, The Teacher, was written in about 4 hours after that, because I had a really strong concept of what I wanted to do. I wanted to capture the vibes of that Dreamscape CD that I loved by DJ Randall. And it meant that when I sat down to write, I wasn't in the studio trying to force out an idea, and I wasn't making music trying to make something that sounded like what other people were doing at the time. I was trying to reconnect with what I loved in what inspired me in the first place. And it meant that the tune wrote itself, to be honest. When I go in the video, I'm going to talk about the different sections and how I made it. And the first thing that I did was the breaks, which is not that normal for me anymore. I prefer to start with the vibes and the intro, samples, pads, get the atmosphere, the vibe and the mood together, and then often bass next, and I actually do the drums last a lot of the time, because I find that you can then make the drums perfect for the vibe of the rest of the tune. But in this particular instance, the drums were the vibe. So in the video, I'm going to talk about the break beat that I used, what I've done to it to get the sound that I wanted, and then the other stuff I did afterwards, layering and whatever, to make it big and modern sounding, because as much as I love old break beats, you can't just use one old break to write a tune. After that, I've talked a bit about the engineering of the drums, but more about how I work in general. I feel like there's a million videos online where people will talk to you about how to EQ a kick or EQ a snare, and then they'll show you how to EQ the hi-hats, and then they'll show you how to EQ the next hi-hat, and honestly, it's just the same thing. You low cut it, right? What I've tried to talk about is what happens before that. So preparation with your samples, preparation with your drums, doing the processing and the work in advance so that you can work a lot quicker. Because this particular tune, yeah, I think I wrote it in about 4 hours, but the main break beat, I think if I looked on a folder in my computer, the break is something I chopped about 8 or 9 years ago. And it's a classic old break at 175 BPM, EQ'd, cut, ready to go. So that the first half hour of the session, select a breakbeat, chop it meticulously on the grid, rearrange it at tempo. That was all done, right? So I was able to work a lot quicker because I had the materials ready. Then as we move on in the video, I'm going to talk to you about the intro and the vibes and how I set the mood for what I wanted. Dark, unsettling, sci-fi, moody vibes. And that part of the tune is important in setting the tone. But the thing I've talked about the most is the bass, because I get people asking me about bass a lot. I get people telling me they can recognise my tunes from the bass, and really that is the biggest big up you can get as a producer. It makes me really happy to hear that. So I felt it was important to go into the bass, not just the EQ layering, stuff like that, but again, the methods behind it, because similarly to the drums, I don't like to do all my bass live in the moment. I mean, I use Serum a lot, I use analog synths, but really, I don't do any of it live. I like to make basses on a separate occasion, make loads of them, put them in a folder. Then when you come to write music, if you've done that with your drums and your bass, you've got all of your materials, your tools are already there. So when I had this idea to make this tune inspired by 1997 by Randall Fats, I didn't sit there and work on Serum for an hour to make the bass and chop a breakbeat for an hour and a half to get the style I wanted. The breaks and the bass were there. It was all about executing the idea. And I really feel this is something that when people do these studio tutorial type videos, I feel like the thought process is often missing, and you just get a video of somebody telling you why they've EQ'd a snare at 200 hertz. And don't get me wrong, like the engineering stuff's really important, but I feel like why you've written a tune is equally important. So what I've tried to get across in the video is, yeah, we've gone into the layers of the bass, of course. There's a lot of processing, subs, mids, getting a thick, full drum and bass sound. But I've tried to explain why I did it the way I did. And also, yeah, talk about my methods for being able to get your ideas out quickly, because that really is so essential. I'm lucky in that I'm in the studio every day now, but I'm not working on music every day. I do a lot of one-to-one teaching. I spend a lot of time talking to other people about music. If I've got 3 hours in the morning to write music, I don't want to spend 3 hours synthesizing a patch. I want to spend 3 hours sketching out an idea for a tune. So all of these methods that I'm showing you in this video are how I've learned to be more efficient and productive in the studio. And it means that when it goes well, a tune can be written in 2, 3, 4 hours, because a lot of the hard work has been done in advance. Moving on in the video, I'll talk a bit more about extra basses, how I've kept the tune interesting all the way through more basses from my library, ultimate recycling, using basses that are literally bounced out of finished tunes, because that defines my sound. And then something else that I thought was really important, so I've talked about it after the bass line, is how I developed the sense of a hook in the teacher. So the bass line has very simple melody. It's classic one note drum and bass. I just hit E a lot, one finger, stabby stabby. But it was very generic, and I realised that it needed something that felt like a hook. So I've done some work on the bass line to make it feel like a hook without being cheesy or too riffy, because what I mean by that is it didn't need a clever melody to be a hook. It just needed something that took the bass away from that one note, and then when it comes back to the one note, it's really satisfying as well. And then there's more work on layering up and building that hook. As I've said, the tune's inspired by the old days, so I used a lot of classic rave sounds, samples from old tunes, and incorporated that as the hook as well. And I feel like those are the elements that enable people to remember the tune. Like if I play it out at 3 o'clock in the morning, it sounds big and heavy and the bass hits and the drums are really hard and aggressive. But hopefully the bit where the high bass and the Mentaz and make a hook will stick in your head, maybe in a way that 5 other similar tunes didn't. I mean, hopefully anyway. So the idea was to have something that functions as a hook, and everything within the tune is there to give it identity. I mean, even down to the vocal sample that I chose. I don't think actually, that's not something that I've chosen to speak about in great detail in a production video, because it's basically a documentary sampled off YouTube. There's not much science in that. some cool effects on it. But the identity of the tune is really important to me. When I say identity, I mean those things that are not the kick and the snare and the sub, and the things that make it memorable. And so the hook is really important. The vocal is also really important in defining the tune, giving it its overall feeling. And then of course, this is a music production tutorial. We are diving into the mixdown a little bit. I tried not to dwell on the mixdown because, as you'll see, as I'm building the layers, I'm getting them to sound how I want anyway. So the mixdown is simpler if you make things sound how you want as you go along. And there's a balance, again, something I tried to talk about, there's a balance between that. You don't want to spend an hour EQing the kick drum before you even know what pattern you're trying to play with the kick drum, right? You don't want to spend an hour splitting the bass frequencies when you're not sure if you like the riff. But there is a point when you know that this is what the tune's going to be like. If you do the work and get the layers right in the bass, then the mixing at the next stage is just a case of squeezing it together, holding it. You're not doing loads of work at the end. And something else I tried to get across in the bit where I talk about mixdowns is how I use buses and make a template. I think it's what you can see in the background here. My lovely multicolored bus template system, but really it's all about submixing all the stages, so your drums are not just going to the master fader and clipping it immediately. They're being squeezed at various stages. And same with the bass as well, and with the Reeses and mids. There's a lot of submixing going on in order to keep the levels controlled at all times to save headroom, gain staging. So rather than turning your master fader down because you've got everything running too hot, I've got lots of buses at lots of stages, turning it all down a little bit and then using some clever plugins to squeeze it a bit more. So the mixdown stuff that I've tried to incorporate in this video is really the clever stuff that will make your drums a little bit tighter and punchier, but not actually seem to go any louder on a fader, and make your bass more steady and squeezed together. Things like that are methods I've developed over the years. Like, it's not just me doing it, but you know, things like parallel compression on the drums, but also parallel processing on the bass maybe. So what I tried to do with a mixdown, rather than talk about every layer and every EQ, just show you the end stages, really, the important stuff that is helping to squeeze the tune together at the end. So yeah, that's what you're going to get if you watch the video. A run through of the track, but a run through of why I made the track and what I was thinking, as well as just technical stuff. And a disclaimer, there are no oscillators in the making of this video. There are no synths running live at any point, apart from maybe one pad that I can't remember how I made because I made it 5 years ago. So the sound design is all a bit different, and hopefully it'll give you a fresh perspective, because I sound like I'm really being a bit of a hater with that comment, but I've watched loads of videos where I've learnt loads about sound design, but then I apply it in a different session and I don't leave it running live in the tune. And again, it saves your CPU and it saves your brain to think about the song and the piece of music, rather than what is Serum doing? Should I go back and tweak it for another half an hour? So hopefully you'll get a bit of a different perspective than some other producers. I've got sort of my way of working that isn't maybe exactly what other people are doing, and hopefully it gives you a bit of a fresh perspective and can give you some fresh inspiration when you're in the studio as well. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about. I've broken down my Tuner Teacher into both the technical and hopefully the thoughts and concepts behind it as well. So if you want to see how it's all done, go and get the latest edition of Computer Music and find out how the teacher was made.